I just came from the cinema, from the movie. I watched this morning, so I'm still a bit shaky because I think I haven't cried that much since a long time ago.
Oh, you're a very cold person then.
Is it? Well, is it a goal to make people cry in the film?
No, I think it's just an inevitability of the story. I don't think, you know, when we first did the film, when we first talked about the film, when I first met Annette about the film, and she said one thing to me that resonated was, I don't want to make this about an old lady dying in a room. I don't want it to be sentimental. So every time we were doing a scene, I would be like, okay, today's not the day we're all going to cry on set, but every day we'd all be in tears, and because, you know, it's my job as a film director to give the actors space in order to choose when they want to go to those places, you know. And so I didn't really know myself, so a lot of the times it was creeping up on me as well, you know. And I'd be sitting at the monitor in tears, and with my producer, with Barbara, and I'd just be like, and I had to eventually say to Barbara, you can't sit next to me. You start it all off. She cries first, and then we all start crying, and I'm like, you have to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
I mean, I love you, but go away.
Because I was wondering, because the shooting was just 40 days, and during the film, I think one of the reasons, because it wasn't, for me, it wasn't about a lady dying, old lady dying and feeling pity, but it already started because, of course, with film star Gloria Grahame, and you know which direction it will go, but you have this feel, it's about love, and it's about the inevitability that it's all going to end, of course, for every one of us. And
Yes.
I think that's the painful part, but also the beautiful part. So you're constantly shifting between those two feelings.
No, it's a good observation. I mean, I think that we've all met someone in our lives that changed our lives one way or another, whether it's good or bad, you know. And I think everyone who watches the film has probably gone through something similar, you know, in different ways, but similar. And so I think you're always on that. I think you can always speak to your audience. It's easier to communicate with an audience when they've already experienced something like that, you know. Even though love and relationships are so abstract at times anyway, as filmmakers, I think it's important that you tell the story and then you let the audience decide whether or not they're going to go with it, you know. So rather than forcing them into it, and as you said, there's an inevitability to the outcome of the story, but we hope there's lots of things to laugh at and have a good time, like any relationship is as well, you know.
Yeah,
and so it's important to know where to gauge that and to have where the tonality of it comes in. I actually think where I get more upset watching the film, and I still have a little tear occasionally, is when you see the point of view from Annette's point of view, from Gloria Grahame's point of view, of what really happened. Because I think you've already went through the scene with Peter Turner, and you think that you know the scene, and then suddenly you have to go back and revisit it from her point of view, and then you really do understand how much she really loved him. And I think that's when it gets me anyway, you know. And so it's okay for a filmmaker to cry at his own movies, as long as it's good crying, you know. Not the kind of crying you're like, why did I do this? What am I thinking of? But it's nice, and I actually do, and I try not to see the film too much because I still like to be moved by it, you know. Even though I obviously in the edit suite I was seeing it every day, but to see it with an audience, I like to sometimes sneak in and watch the audiences. I don't watch the movies over here, and I'm watching the audience. It's quite unsettling for them, and I'm kind of going, wow, you know, they're getting really taken away in this, you know, and that's to do with those actors up there. They're just amazing actors that can draw you in.
Yeah, and of course that's a job of an actor to believe somebody and be real.
Yeah.
But in some way it's from the moment they start, because you are drifting in their story, and because it's so real and it's not bad all the time, but there are also happy moments. So you're really one of them, and I think it's also the reason for the director of photography.
Yes.
What was her name?
Ulla Ponticus.
Yeah, and I think the camera work got a great deal in it as well, because it seems like she's dancing around the characters all the time and light as a feather. How did you discuss with that, how you would do the camera work?
It was interesting because, you know, memory in cinema is not really well done very much, because cinematically memory is it's almost the opposite, because memory should be like that, right? It should happen straight away. It's what you do in your head. So I kept, on my train journeys going back and forth from London back up to Scotland when I was preparing the film. I kept thinking about memory, you know, that way you look out the window and you think about something, and I was thinking, how do you do that? And then, so my first port of call was to go to the production designer, who was also a woman, Eve Stewart, and even I talked a lot about, I said to her, I want them to walk through a door and they're in the next scene. I don't want to do and why I say it's uncinematic is because usually you have to show an establishing shot. So you have to establish place, time, you know, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I wanted to get away with it. I didn't care where we were, as long as we were in a room or we were somewhere. I didn't have to establish it in my head. I just thought, because you're into the story, you're into them, you know. And when you're in love, you don't care where you are half the time anyway, right? So that was my whole philosophy. And so Eve came up with these really interesting, dynamic ways of, so we would have a set and the wall would turn and the bed would go into another set. And I'd initially just said, oh, you know, they'll just walk out a door. And she was like, no, no. So she took it a step further. And, you know, like we built a beach on the studio so that we could just take Jamie Bell's, Peter Turner's character, and take him through the door and back into the set, you know. And so it was really quite theatrical in a way, you know, but I wanted to keep the purity of the memory with the audience. I didn't want to suddenly give the audience a breath and go, okay, now we're in New York, you know, 1979 or something, you know, so you're always establishing music and all that stuff. I was like, no, to hell with that, I don't care. Because to me, the timeline wasn't that big. It was a 3-year love affair. So to me, I felt I could go back and forward. And in the way that Peter Turner wrote the book itself, because the first scene he writes in the book is when he gets the phone call saying that Gloria's ill. And that's the first scene in the book. And I thought that was really interesting when I read the book. Because I was like, oh, it's interesting, because I never felt like I was out of sync of where he was in his relationship with her. So I thought, well, why don't we bring that to the storytelling? Why don't we bring it to the script and have fun with that idea? And also, the audience, I think, to show them the mechanics of the filmmaking is quite interesting. Because I think they like that. It's like watching a piece of theatre and you see the light changing, and it's quite theatrical, but it's also, I think the audiences like to know that you're actually signaling something, you know, you're actually changing something, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's like you're...
Sorry, that's a terribly long answer.
No, no, that's okay. It's interesting because it's like you're in somebody's head, and you get grasped by the throat by doing that, and by choosing not for these establishing shots, and you're, yeah, well...
Yeah, no, you're quite right. It's the purity of his memory of the moment. And to have it was good for us because we had a strong point of view. You know, it was coming from one man's point of view, was his story. It was about how he met Gloria Grahame. It was about what happened in their love affair. And we only changed that point of view once, was to retell the story from her point of view. And that was the only time we ever changed it. So the audience are never ahead of our character. You know, they're always with the character, and the pieces of the puzzle are the same pieces of the puzzle that he's picking up and putting down as we are as an audience, you know. And I like that when you can, that allows you to be able, as you say, be more fluid and much more dynamic and dancing around. And that's what, and then of course, Ulla Ponticus, who was our DP, she then had it in her head that when I mentioned the word fluid, she was like, yeah, brilliant. And you know, so she really designed the camera shots so that, you know, we could lose the character for a second and then they would change their clothes behind the camera.
Oh, really? Because I was wondering,
there was no edits. So then we had,
wow,
like, in Liverpool, the first one, we go from Liverpool to London, there's actually a hole in the wardrobe where Annette's pretending to be really sick. She's not pretending, she's a method actor. And then she's lying there sick, and then as the camera leaves her and goes with him, she jumps out of bed, goes through the hole in the wardrobe, changes her hair. There's people there changing her hair, and she's dancing away. By the time he gets down the hallway, and then he goes behind the camera at one point as we see her point of view, his point of view of her, and then he's getting himself all changed quickly. So it was all quite fun. Wow. It's kind of theatrical.
And I know that you have a television background as well. You do television, but have you done theater plays?
No, I've always wanted to do theatre, you know. I started off making films, making movies. I've made like 9 movies or something. And then I did a bit of television, did Sherlock for the TV. But I've always wanted to go back and do theatre. I like to do stuff through the camera. I think it's rewarding for everybody, you know. I'm not averse to CG or anything like that. I love all that stuff, but that's fun as well, and that can be playful as well. But I think as I go on, I'm much more interested in trying to tell stories through the camera. I mean, just let the camera be a character as well, you know. let that tell us something as well, you know. I know it sounds like obvious, but a lot of people, I guess, don't really want to do that. You know, I think sometimes they just want the camera to be that kind of neutral observer, you know. I quite like my camera getting involved.
Has that changed during the years since you're a filmmaker?
Not really. I mean, when I did Gangster #1 with Paul Bettany in 2000, that was 17 years ago. I did Acid House before that, but that was 3 short films. But I did my first movie, which was in 2000. That was, again, from a very strong point of view, from his point of view as a gangster. And I think it started from there, just how the camera can be really an emotive tool for you. You know, I know it sounds like, well, of course it is, but I think a lot of people don't use it as powerfully as they can do, you know.
And because of course you have watched the films of Gloria Grahame in your research, what have you taken from them, or have you learned by watching them maybe again, because maybe you watched them already earlier?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, my train journeys up and down from Scotland to London was 4 hours on a Friday, 4 hours on a Monday, so that was great 4 hours you can just spend doing whatever you do. So I had the black and white movies on, everyone's watching the soap operas, I'm watching Gloria Grahame films, fall in love with them again, because I realised that I had known Gloria Grahame's work quite well. I knew that I knew her. I didn't know that I'd known her work so well until I saw the movies, and I'm like, oh, she was that woman in that movie. Oh, brilliant! And so I got a real inspiration from that, you know. And even though the film's not about Gloria Grahame, it's not her biography. I wanted to pay homage to her work in some way. So we did all this back projection, the way that they had done them in her films, like in A Lonely Place. There's a scene with Gloria and Humphrey Bogart on the beach. And I knew we had a beach scene, so I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the back projection. Easy to say, quite difficult to do. We ended up with the biggest back projection screen in the whole history of cinema.
How big was it?
It was over 100 foot wide. Massive. But you can do that now because the projections allow you, digital projections allow you to do that. But that was really complicated. I mean, quite honestly, we all at one point went, maybe we should just put a green screen up. It'd be so much easier.
But you didn't use any green screen, right?
Not one single bit of it. But because it's nice, it's fun. Again, it's been playful, but also paying homage to another filmmakers and Gloria's work itself. But don't do it in a way that seems obvious, but just do it in your own way, because you just decide that, well, I want to do that. And then in the apartment, she's in New York, for instance, the apartment in the Big Heat. It's the same designs that we put in and stuff like that people might see, they might not see, but it helps tell the story a little bit, because, you know, the film's not about Gloria, because I want people to go away, though, to Google her. Unlike Peter Turner couldn't do it in his day, just Google Gloria Grahame, they would have known everything about her, and they would have no story to tell, right? So it was nice to hopefully the audience. I think her job, as far as with Gloria's concerned, is that they'll go away and hopefully Google Gloria Grahame and they'll have fun.
Which film should we watch of
her?
her?
There's no doubt about it. I think the best Gloria Grahame movie, I think, to start with has to be In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart, directed by Nicholas Ray, who was Gloria's then first husband, who also directed Rebel Without a Cause. So it was Hollywood royalty of making that film. It's a brilliant, brilliant movie. And so yeah, I would recommend that one.
We will. I will dig it up.
Yeah, so no, it really is genuinely worth watching. It was a classic, you know, on this day.
Yeah. Thank you very much
for
nice the experience.
And I like your outfit. It looks like
Thanks.
You're out of bed, right?
I did it especially for you.